This episode of Warp 5 is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 150,000 titles for your smartphone, tablet, or desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. Also, help us keep Star Trek discussion coming to you each day by becoming a Trek FM patron through Patreon. Get access to exclusive content and become part of the team. You'll find all the details at patreon.com/trekfm. That's patreon.com/trekfm.
Hi, this is Tucker Smallwood from Star Trek Enterprise. You're listening to Trek FM.
How we doing, Trip? Ready when you are. Prepare for warp.
Course laid in, sir. Request permission to get underway. Let's go.
Welcome, Boomers, to another episode of Warp 5, Trek FM's dedicated Enterprise show. I'm your host, Floyd Dorsey, and I'm joined in the conference room by my co-host, Brandon Shea Matala. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm super busy right now typing away and writing a whole bunch of really great episodes of Enterprise.
Oh.
Can you hear me typing?
Yeah, I see that. So what's the inspiration here? Why you got your writer's cap going on?
Because I'm a really good writer and I don't know, I can't even make a good joke about it.
Well, we actually have a pro coming in here, so she might be able to tutor you a little bit.
Really?
Yes, we have a special guest on with us tonight. We're actually going to be joined by Phyllis Strong, executive story editor and writer and co-producer and all kinds of other executive titles on many, many episodes of Enterprise. So it's a real pro. When I say we got a pro to help you out, we've actually got a real pro.
Oh man, that's absolutely outstanding. That's excellent. I'm so glad that we have this chance to talk with her because she did write a whole bunch of really, really good episodes of Star Trek Enterprise and even Star Trek Voyager. So we got lots of interesting questions for her. So why don't we beam her right on in?
And joining Brandon and I here in the conference room is Star Trek executive story editor and writer Phyllis Strong. Welcome to Warp 5, Phyllis.
Thank you. Actually, I was both an executive story editor and then a co-producer, into producer. So I had a great run on Enterprise, and I'm excited to talk about it.
You had a lot of hats, it sounds like, and you probably were wearing them all at the same time.
Yes, and I was flipping them around quite often.
Well, you've got many writing credits for Star Trek, but you actually started in the sci-fi genre working on Hercules. Is that right?
That is correct. Although before it, my first break was actually in an action-adventure syndicated show called Tales of the South Seas, which was about based on a Jack London story about a kind of pirate adventurer and his native sidekick and their life in Tahiti and South Pacific, etc., and all manner of stuff. So that was my first break. That's how I got into the WGA. But actually before that, one of the ways I got noticed was the way many people who eventually landed on Star Trek or other places did. We wrote Star Trek spec scripts, and I wrote a spec Deep Space Nine, and it was a powerful piece, I guess, about someone who'd been on a concentration camp in Bajor and all of that, and how we learned how this particular character had sort of adopted the identity of someone else who had died, and all the reverberations on the station, and that got the notice of some agents. And at that time, you could submit specs to Star Trek that weren't represented and try to get the opportunity to pitch. And as I recall, Hans Beimler on Deep Space Nine invited me in to pitch, and that was one of my early experiences, and it was great. I did not sell anything, but it was my start and got me a little noticed, and then I wrote an X-Files spec, and then I landed on this Tales of the South Seas, and after that, as a matter of fact, I wrote some more stuff, including a Buffy the Vampire Slayer spec, and that was what got me the Hercules freelance, because it was supposed to be Hercules meets Dracula, and they needed someone who knew about vampires. So that was my start there.
Wow, you mentioned X-Files, so we Brandon and I are both X-Files fans. So you're just we're even more fans of you now. Like we already were fans of your Star Trek work.
Thank you. Well, once again, this was a spec X-Files. These are all things that writers getting started, and even now, basically to both improve their craft and get noticed, you want to just keep writing and get stuff out there. So X-Files was around at the time, and it certainly was popular, and I was certainly into it. So I gave that a try. But it was in this time period, and with Hercules and this Buffy spec that I did, et cetera, that I was also thinking about how I could pitch or get into Star Trek, which was always the Holy Grail, as one can imagine. It turned out that for the last season of Voyager, they were actually looking to add some story editors. And I actually had worked with a terrific writer named Michael Sussman on Tales of the South Seas, and we knew each other. And he had sold pitches and done episodes of Voyager. And we decided to join forces, actually, because there was sort of one slot open. So it was rather than go up against each other, we joined forces, and that made us even more appealing. And we were given an audition script, which turned into the Body and Soul episode, the body switching episode for Voyager. And that's how we got on and did a year of that. And then during that time, even though he was busy, he was not running Voyager at the time, and Brandon Braga was working on what would become Enterprise and was in and around the same offices. And he would also consult, and actually he had a story credit on one of our scripts, and we got to know him and work with him. And we were actually the first people to be asked to continue on to Enterprise for its maiden voyage, so to speak. That's how I landed on Enterprise.
You decided on working with Michael Sussman. So you said you met him on this. What was the name of the show again? It was
Tales of the South Seas.
Tales of the South Seas. So you decided to combine forces to write an episode of Voyager, and you just discovered that you worked so well together that you continued to write together, because most of your writing credits on Star Trek are with Michael Sussman in one form or another.
That's correct. We had a great partnership.
I just want to take a second to say at this that both Floyd and my favorite episode of Enterprise was actually written by you guys. My favorite episode of Enterprise is Future Tense.
And mine is Strange New World.
Oh, cool. That's excellent, because Strange New World was our first episode on Enterprise.
Just talking about that, since we're on Strange New World, were you given guidance, like where you said, let's go out here, we need a story where they're discovering a planet, or was that just something that you and Mike just wanted to do?
That one actually was more of a group, all of the writers, we would gather in a room and talk about various ideas. And at that point, it was also coming out of talking about what kind of tone and what kind of series Brannon wanted, and we could all contribute to. And one of the things that he had wanted, and we had all talked about and discussed, was that, here was a Star Trek series that was on a ship in our quadrant of the galaxy, so to speak, where we might run into people, aliens, etc., that we had known even from the original. And here we were 100 years before Kirk and Spock, which meant not only the opportunity for some origin type stories and callbacks to things that were known in the Kirk and Spock time, but also, again, a sense of what kind of crew is this, and are they going to get along in the same way that their descendants on, as Picard and the rest on the future Enterprise would get along, or were there going to be other kinds of conflicts? What was it to be in this 100 years before Kirk and Spock? Along with that, this was our first opportunity to be on a shipbound series, and again, one in which we might both visit places we as viewers had seen, places and aliens that we as viewers had seen, but also that sense of the original series of to boldly go where no man has gone before. Sorry for this long-winded explanation, but the idea of exploration, the idea of just going out there and not knowing what you were going to run across. It was not a mission to a group of aliens who were going to, negotiate a treaty from one place to another. It wasn't that there was some distress signal, etc. This was the pure delight of exploration. And that was something we talked about, and that became, in the room, Strange New World. And what would that be like? But essentially, we would break the story. We would talk about various aspects plus our characters. But so you get the bones together to some extent, but both the flesh and even breaking and reforming the bones was the job of the writers, and that's what we did. So the inspiration was really that wonderful sense of awe and wonder of being out there and how exciting that would be. And, the scene where the ship has come to this planet, the first one, what is it going to be like? Who's going down there? And of course, being a drama, things go horribly, horribly awry. But that was the sense of it. So I'm delighted it's one of your favorites because in impulse and in what it really set out to do in terms of tone, it really captured one of the original series, original Star Trek precepts. And I'm glad you picked up on that.
Well, I just love your explanation on that, because that's exactly what I pick up on that, especially with season 1 and 2 being kind of a future for us, and we're exploring, and this is something that we could actually do. We could actually get there. But yeah, I actually got started being a Star Trek fan by watching the series with my grandparents when I was young. It was in the original series reruns back in the mid 70s. And one of the first episodes I can remember is Shore Leave. So it just so happens that I just saw Shore Leave last night. I just saw Shore Leave last night, and it reminds me of Strange New World, the beginning of Strange New World in the way that is, and, running through the fields and being on an alien planet. But my grandparents actually lived in the mountains at the foot of a mountain in the woods and things. So when I was a little boy, I would play around their house, and sometimes I'd play Star Trek, and this is exploring a Strange New World. And the campfire scene and all of that, oh my gosh, it takes me back. So that was awesome.
Great. That is great. Like I said, that sort of started off. As far as future tense, that was much more in the vein of our temporal Cold War and our sort of larger kind of fight the future, if you will, series of episodes. Much more, I wouldn't say exactly X-Files-y, but just sort of that sense that there is stuff going on and agendas happening, beyond what you can see on the surface. And that was, as well as kind of hitting some of the fun of, what happens with time ships and things like that. But very much part of this Cold War aspect. Again, that was much more of our Jeopardy, starting from even the pilot, but really digging down deeper in season 2.
One of the great things about Future Tense for me, the first episode of Warp 5, this podcast that I was on, we actually did a commentary for Future Tense, and we went through it, and I was actually talking about how much I loved it, and we named the episode of our podcast, we called it This Episode Screams Prequel, because there's so many things in it that I really think made it fire on all cylinders, and it was a kind of a perfect prequel episode, because, you know, right from the beginning, when they open up that ship and they see the dead body in there and they ask, they're like, is this Ephraim Cochrane? Bang, instantly I'm thinking of the episode Metamorphosis, and you get the Tholians in there, and instantly you're thinking of the Tholian web, right? And, you know, so many things in that. It was perfect.
Yes, and I will have to do the hat tip to Mike Sussman in terms of sort of grabbing those. Well, I was, as he was, a huge original series fan, and I knew all of this, but he had a particular skill in kind of running, wouldn't it be cool if we saw this? And wow, I was just thinking about Cochrane for here. And I'd be like, yeah, and what about this? So really hat tip to him, especially on Future Tense. I think if one were to ask about the sort of the origin and the inspirations for that, it really was taking the idea of both time travel and immortality and all of that and grafting that onto our series.
That's Warp 592 if you want to listen to us gushing about your episode there. Cause
oh, great.
We did a full commentary track on it. It was so much fun.
Oh, that is great. I will admit that it's been a while since I've seen some of these. Unfortunately, my life, all lives of writers, not only do you have to keep writing, you have to keep being on top of everything else that's going on out there. So the luxury of going back and taking these all in, it's something I haven't indulged in, but you have now encouraged me to go do that. So I'm very excited.
Yes.
I have one more question on Future Tense. So this is me fangirling it out since I got you on the line here. So
all right.
Did you, in your head, it never came on screen, but did you guys envision a story for this dead guy that they found in the ship in Future Tense?
Not one that actually stuck with me. Knowing us, we did, but I think as we barreled through, we kind of left that behind. So I hate to disappoint you on that one.
That's okay.
But it's not at the forefront.
That's okay.
So fangirl and fan guy on something else, and I'll let you know.
Oh, well, we'll probably do an episode about that anyway, because we do a lot of what ifs and writers' room episodes. So we'll fill that blank.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great, and maybe it'll actually prompt my memory, and I'll go, oh yeah. To tell you the truth, I do have in notebooks. I have all of not only our shooting scripts and the various revisions and stuff it went through, but all of the rough drafts and the first pieces. So I could probably go back into my Future Tense binder and see what I got there. Mm-hmm. But we don't have the time right now.
Well, we have our first listener question here. This comes from a listener named Akaku Beeman. And his question is, what's the process like writing a script with Mike Sussman versus writing alone? Would you split up different acts or scenes, or would one of you write a full draft and then another would take an editorial pass over it?
We would split the script generally into various scenes that might be on one storyline versus another. And we would write and then rewrite each other. There were times when we actually, if we were on a tough scene or not, we might be in the room trying to go over it. But lots of writers, when they write together, it really means it is a very sort of individual thing. So most of us take it on ourselves and then shoot it over for reconfiguring and notes and or rewriting. So we were both comfortable with having each of us comment and rewrite the other. So that's pretty much how it happened.
Were you a Star Trek fan? You said that you liked all the series. Were you a fan before you started working for Voyager, or what series got you started?
Reruns of the original. Absolutely the original. You are talking to a Kirk, Spock, McCoy. There was a point, I don't want to be tested right now, but there was a point at which I knew every episode, the name of it, what was going on in it. If you described an episode, I'd tell you what it was. If you gave me a title, I would describe the episode. I knew deep and far. I had, when I was young and watching these reruns, there were also sometimes the opportunity to, buy those photo stills and like buttons and stuff. And I remember somebody telling me, and I was very upset about this, but it made perfect sense, that as you know, we were watching syndicated reruns. I was in New York and watching it on probably Channel 11. And it turns out that, of course, these were originally 52-minute episodes, which, and by the way, I, own them all on Blu-ray. But the local stations, when they ran them, they wanted more time for commercials. I think back then it was down from 52 to 48. We're not even down to the 42 that, a CW show or most shows are now. And it turns out they would slice them, edit them, and they would take those pieces of film and make photos out of them to sell. That's where they came from.
Wow.
How's that for trivia?
So I just got another show idea. We bring Phyllis back on and we grill her on original series trivia. We give you a little bit of time.
You'd have to let me get back into it. I'm very good at it, but not quite as good. Before I started writing, really getting into the writing seriously, I worked on one of my first jobs, sort of producing or doing anything in this business, was working on a science fiction TV special for Fox. It was done in conjunction with what's now the Paley Center, the Museum of TV and Radio, and it was basically a massive clip show. And they would do a clip show for each broadcast network based on the network's prime focus. So CBS would do sitcoms and stuff because of the I Love Lucy and all their stuff. And anyway, and it would rotate each year. And for Fox, they were doing a sci-fi one. And through a connection, I met the exec producer on it. And literally, I was the only person who really knew like Star Trek, Twilight Zone, all of the X-Files, all of this stuff. And they basically hired me on as like a PA or something. And then I kept demonstrating what I could do. And they made me they gave me a producer credit and zero money. But that was
Oh my gosh.
when I first was getting into all of this. And the great thing about it was that it being for the Museum of TV and Radio, we had access to every studio. Nobody held back. Paramount, Universal, we had Quantum Leap, you name it. Everybody gave in, and it was great. And one of the Trexperts we talked to was Mark Altman. From there, I got to know him, and I will say that at least at that time, I could definitely hold my own with him, which is saying a lot.
So what does the title Executive Story Editor mean, and how does it differ from Story Editor?
That is simple. Executive Story Editor is one bump up from Story Editor. It's one of those things, how like if they, in the world of vice president, then there's a senior vice president, then an executive vice president. It's a whole bunch of words and titles to sort of differentiate the level. But they actually do have meaning in terms of what your role and responsibilities are. Entry level is a staff writer, and then one becomes a story editor. So that's pretty entry level. And really your basic function is to come up with ideas and to outline, to participate in the room in structuring and getting into the stories, and then into being able to produce a good enough draft of a script. It doesn't have to be perfect, that the higher ups can take and give you notes on, or take over and run with, depending on the needs of the show, and of course our really tight time frames and schedules. So that's the answer there.
So just going back to the individual episodes here, Civilization was listed on your credits, and again, going back to the original series fan that I am, and the Captain Kirk and the Spock and the Dr. McCoy, Civilization reminded me quite a bit of an original series episode.
Thank you on that. Actually, I have what writers would do at times is we sort of frame screen captures from the series, which has like the name of the series and maybe an episode, and certainly a picture of your credit there to kind of show the world and look out. And I'm literally looking at that I picked Civilization for that because it really was not only, it was one of my favorites in conception, and we can talk about kind of how it was executed and maybe how choices were made, down the line in terms of how it might look, etc. But really, it was inspired by the original Kirk, and a lot of that and the playfulness is really what I brought to the table. Especially sort of the romantic playfulness. You need a woman for that. I will put that out right here.
Very good. Very good. Another episode on the list that I have here was Fusion. And I can say the first time that I saw Fusion, I was blown away. Like, that's deep and real. And that's one of those great Star Trek vehicles, where we're telling something from now and we're putting it in Star Trek right here. What was the inspiration on that, or what was the message that we were trying to get out there for that?
Well, the message is about sort of violation and abuse, if you will, and all of those lines that get crossed or don't. You will note that the story was by Rick Berman and Brannon Braga. So what Mike and I brought to it was the execution and the outlining of it, and well, actually the outlining of it, the story, that's the story. We basically brought the scenes to life. And I do remember that the T'Pol scenes in that, I both struggled over, and they were very powerful. And when you're writing something like that, it can kind of stay with you. So that was a definite intense experience.
It is when you're watching it too. I mean, it's even now, even on rewatches, and I don't know how many times I've rewatched the series completely from beginning to end, it's still cringeworthy, which is a good thing, because I mean, it's making you feel something. It makes you think about, like applying this to our world right now. And it's very, it's moving, not maybe not in a crying way, but in just all kinds of ways. I mean, it's a moving episode. So
no, I completely agree. And it's emotional. And Jolene really did a great job of, think about it, how you basically play an emotional story as a Vulcan. Hats off to her, along with Leonard Nimoy and everything, and every other Tuvok, every other Vulcan actor who had to play a Vulcan. But really, to have one of these kinds of episodes, right up there with the challenge of doing originally An Amok Time or This Side of Paradise, where how do you communicate feeling when you are suppressing feelings? And I also do remember we had a lot of talk about it. Always, I think it comes up in every series, I would imagine, when you talk about what it really means for Vulcans to be logical or not to have emotion. Does it mean they not have it? Do they suppress it? Where does it go? How does that work? And this episode, if memory serves, sparked a bunch of those questions in the room.
And then we have, the creepy Vulcan guy. I can't remember his name, the actor's name right now, but he did such a good job. He did such a good job of playing that creepy character.
I know.
So looking at your list here of episodes that you co-wrote or you supported, you had Body and Soul, Prophecy, Author, and Renaissance Man on Voyager. And then on Enterprise, you had Strange New World, Civilization, Shadows of P'Jem, Fusion, Detained, Dead Stop, The Catwalk, Future Tense, Regeneration, Bounty, Exile, and Damage. I have to say, we posted your list of episodes on our Facebook group, the Babel Conference. That's actually the name of our Trek FM listeners group.
Oh, cool.
And people were looking at that like that is an awesome rewatch list right there. Just go down the line, just pop them in Netflix or DVD, Blu-ray. It is a great rewatch list. Like, you have some great, great episodes. One of them that you had here was Dead Stop. And that's another great episode that I like a lot. And I actually had Dead Stop in mind when there was a past Warp 5 episode. I can't remember the name of it, but Christopher Jones, he's the publisher of Trek FM. He was actually hosting Warp 5 at the time, and I was just a listener. And the show was about what were some possible movie ideas if Enterprise had been made into a movie.
Right.
And Dead Stop was the inspiration. It would have been like the Space Seed for the Wrath of Khan version of it. And that was something that I had an idea for, was those guys. We have to come back to those guys because the way it actually ended. So that episode, I just love it. I love it for the mystery of it. Did you have any ideas to actually come back and revisit that?
It came out so well that afterwards we always kept in the back of our mind, where it could go and what we might want to do. But really, it's funny because it was sort of conceived as, again, we were episodic and standalone episodes, and yet this was when we were starting to get into a little more serialized, and this was really running after Minefield. So, and it really was our run and jump and go through tubes. It was our action episode. So that was really sort of the fun and adventure of it. We always thought how a Dead Stop 2 would be great. I do remember that. So hats off to you. I think you got it.
So just as a reader of the novels and stuff, just so that you know, Phyllis, they've actually taken that storyline and run with it in the novels for after Enterprise.
Okay. Okay, good. There you go.
Because I'm a reader of the novels as well. Yeah.
That's great. Well, whoever wrote that novel, took it and ran with it, I assume, in the best way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It lent itself to that. Who wrote it?
Christopher L. Bennett.
Great. Then actually, I'd love to take a look.
Yeah, the series of novels is called The Rise of the Federation. It takes place, they wrote a bunch of books about the Romulan War, and so these are the ones that are after the Romulan War. But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Cool.
So I had a question about the episode Detained. When that episode was being conceived, did you guys know that you wanted to have Dean Stockwell in that episode, or did that come after the fact?
That came after the fact. I'd love to say that we had created it for him, but you could never count on getting somebody of Dean's stature and his schedule, etc. And once again, he came on obviously because he was interested in working with Scott again. So this was much more of a case of, in terms of schedule and in terms of some of the things that were offered to him, that's what he liked the best, I believe. And I can easily be corrected if he or anyone anyone who's more familiar with this. Again, I wasn't in on all the casting and the other stuff, so somebody may know better. But as far as I know, this was something he was delighted to do, was offered to him. It fit a schedule, and it fit something he could do. Mm-hmm. It was a thrill to have him on set.
Like, that episode in itself is it's so poignant and it's so important, even in this day and age, with there's so much fear of refugees and people coming into our countries and stuff, that even now this episode is very important and everybody should be watching this episode.
Yes. And unfortunately it resonates more than we ever intended it to.
Another episode that we have on the list, if I didn't mention this, is Damage. Damage from season 3. It's actually regarded as one of the favorite episodes of all of our listeners, our Warp 5 listeners. Like, when it's mentioned in our Babel conference, people love that episode. They jump into it. They think that's one of the top 3, top 5 best episodes, maybe, of Star Trek.
And it's one of the ones that they're very sad that we never got a follow-up on to find out, for Archer's reaction and what he did in that episode.
No kidding. I believe I probably fought or wanted to fight for that. It was always the case of, we're going in this direction. We need to move forward and not necessarily go back, or we need to jump to other things. I am so heartened to hear you say that, because that is probably my favorite episode of maybe all of the produced episodes I've ever written. And it was something that was inspired by what I find a theme in my work in writing, which is that moral dilemma of, what would you do for the greater good? And how much would you sacrifice? And what does it do to you? So I cannot tell you, you have made my night.
Excellent.
We've actually had Warp 5 episodes in the past year or so that some of them we were debating what that would look like. Like, what would the trial of Jonathan Archer look like? I think we may have done some what ifs. What if Casey Biggs' character, what if he didn't make it home? And then that civilization or that species shows back up in season 4, season 5, and they want to put Archer on trial, and we end up with like court-martial, something like court-martial from the original series.
And if we're talking court-martial in the original, yes, I am fully down on that. And once again, this was a slightly darker version. This was really a not perfect people, and in my mind, this was, to me, a direct line back to the original series and to that kind of moral dilemma, and along the lines of what a Captain Kirk would be feeling, not only in what he does, but as he wanders the ship in naked time or something, what he has given up and the loneliness of space. If you remember that whole scene.
Yes.
I think that was part of my background when I was doing it, just that sense. And I think Scott Bakula gave an amazing, amazing performance in this.
Out of the episodes that we've been discussing, and there's just the whole list that you have, I mean, you just told us what your favorite is, or probably one of your favorites. And listener Justin Oser actually had that. He wanted to know, like, out of all the episodes that you've written, which is your favorite? Are we going to have Damage at the top? Like, what do you think? Maybe your top 3, or do you not want? Is it like picking out your favorite child, or what is that?
As a caveat, I will say that you can have favorites for different reasons and different things, and also it can be colored by how you envisioned it versus how it came out, etc. So Damage is definitely, between conception, executed, and the kind of deep moral dilemma type theme, that is my favorite theme, and so that does make it to my favorite episode. In terms of the others, I love so many of them, and you've mentioned a number of them here. I will say that I really liked the sort of the evolution of the Archer to Paul relationship, and therefore, for that reason, Shadows of P'Jem is one of my favorites. That real bringing together of them for the first time, and that expression of friendship, attachment. Once again, my touchstones are the kinds of emotions we got in the original series, and to me, Shadows of P'Jem gave me, I hope gave other people that as well. That's probably that and Civilization were probably. I swear it is hard to choose between them when you start thinking about the details. Like, oh, I loved that part. That was great.
Maybe this would be easier for you to answer. Which episode that you wrote surprised you the most, for good or bad, when it actually showed up on the screen, as opposed to what it looked like on the paper?
Oh, that's a good one. I think actually Fusion was one that surprised me in that it sort of got the depth that we were going for, and that's not always easy to achieve.
So was it in a good way? It surprised you in a good way?
Yes, in a good way. In a good way. I'm not sure I would really go into the ones that surprised me in a bad way, because there were so many things go into the execution, so many different things that, not to go into specifics, but sometimes a costume decision was, not one I ever envisioned. Or sometimes a casting decision was just not what I originally envisioned. So there would be some of those disappointments, but once again, those things got outweighed by other performances, by the direction, by many, many things. I will say that Dead Stop also turned out to be, it cut together really well. It had that energy. When you're doing something more action-oriented, you don't always see it. Maybe you see it on the page, but you don't always see it as it's produced. And then, especially in editing, it comes together and you go, yes.
So we have another listener question. This also comes from Akaku Beeman. And he asked which Enterprise character was easiest to write for, or which was most difficult to write for. So what would stand out to you? What would you think?
I think that's a really good question I'm going through in my mind. what one might define as making a character easy to write for is that there's such a strong sense of personality and consistency in them that, you just know who they are, what they're going to say in any situation. I'd say the two of those that were easiest were probably Trip and Dr. Phlox. There just was their way of responding and what they got into. Even if we hadn't conceived as much at the beginning of Trip's backstory and stuff that happened with the Xindi attack, all of that and his journey made perfect sense and was easy and rewarding to actually plot out as well as to write scenes for. And I would say probably for most people, Vulcans, in this case T'Pol, can be the hardest to write because you are trying to thread the needle between logic and not showing emotion and the not having, which isn't true, or the repressed emotion, which is. So that can be the hardest. All those, how do you do it without saying?
Right. That does actually make a lot of sense. It would be very difficult to write for a Vulcan character. And even for a Vulcan an actor to be acting in that would be difficult.
Yes. And like I said, Jolene really, and she so came into her own with the character, as the episodes and seasons progressed.
Phyllis, what are some of your latest projects or something that maybe our listeners could look for, or maybe a sneak peek that you might have for us?
Great. Well, actually, I love sci-fi and I also love period pieces. And ironically, they are similar to write in the sense that you are world building. And I love to build worlds, whether they are from our past or a certain time, or whether they're from the future and things we've conceived of. And interestingly, writers I worked with on Enterprise, Andrea Maria Jacques Matan, ended up working on and producing Mad Men for a number of years. And one of the reasons they were selected was because if they could write, a Star Trek world, then they could certainly write the world of the 60s. So in that vein, I have a new project that's out there. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it is my version of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It's a series based on a real stage robber and a robber baron, and Mark Twain is a character, and it's pretty damn terrific, and people are looking at it right now. So I'm really hoping to bring it to your screens at some point.
So if Mark Twain is a character in this story, then it takes place in Star Trek continuity because we had Mark Twain in Time's Arrow Part 1 and 2.
We sure did. Absolutely. And I would be happy to do the novelized or, version of that at any way, shape, and time. I would be happy to have any version of Star Trek land in the 1860s in this case. This is a young Mark Twain, so even better.
Excellent. How can our listeners follow you on social media?
I am on Twitter at Philly Strong, PHYLLY STRONG. Sometimes my friends call me Philly or something, and sometimes they don't, and it was what I could get on Twitter. So that's the best way, and I go back and forth on that depending on how busy I am, and that's probably the best way. So say hello to me there, and I'm eager to say hello back.
Well, thank you so much for coming on Warp 5, Phyllis.
Just before we say goodbye, is there any other stories you'd like to share about working in the business?
Somewhere between the great stories and the horror stories and, and everything in between. I will say that when you find a group, a crew and a set of actors and a set of producers and writers that are as great as they were on Star Trek, you stick with them. And a lot of the fun comes from all the interstitial pieces, from the Halloween costumes that people will wear despite the fact they're already in costume, at a Halloween party, sort of the birthday parties as they would do. There were always these little bits. Oh, and the best parts were some great dailies, which I'm sure have now evaporated, but some great scenes when, when the camera's still rolling, but the scene has been cut and people are doing everything from little tap dances to, their facial reactions onto what they just said or how they did. It really is kind of a magical world. And I hope everyone who's listening to me gets to experience something like that at some point. We have a great live tweeting and all that stuff is great now, but being there is also terrific.
Well, thank you so much, Phyllis, for coming on Warp 5. We'd love to have you again sometime. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
I would love to, and I'd love to hear more about Damage, so please let me know.
Well, we're actually going through our season 3 retrospective, so maybe we can invite you on when we get to Damage.
I would love that.
Excellent.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we need to have her for the retrospective. We need to have her for the drill Phyllis, or the stump Phyllis. There you go. And then the professional writers room.
Okay. I'm planning on coming back 2 more times. One to geek out on the original, and one to bathe and exalt in recapping Damage, because I would love to do that.
Well, definitely Damage. That would be awesome, because that's a great episode. All right. Well, thank you so much, Phyllis, for coming aboard.
You're welcome. And take care, guys. And thanks again.
All right, Brandon, that was great. That was a great interview. Were you just totally geeking out like I was while she was talking about our favorite episodes?
I believe I used the term fangirl at one time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you said it more than once, actually. So you had her saying it even. So that's a good deal. Oh man, I seriously, like, reading the list of the episodes that she was a part of the creative process on, it's just an amazing watch list. So that was awesome. That was great.
What was really awesome is that, she was able to recollect so much about it. It's been 15 or 16 years since she's worked on Enterprise, right, in some of these episodes. But, I mean, she knew a lot of the stories right off the top of her head, which was pretty awesome.
Right. Yeah. And then, I mean, we're taking advantage of that because we do rewatches and things, and she's saying that she's never even had the chance to do a rewatch. So that's even more impressive because she's just thinking of it off the top of her head. So, yeah, that's really, really cool. So I'm serious. Like, I already call Phyllis for the writer's room battle or whatever we got going on. I'm hiding behind her when it comes time for that. If we're going to have a throwdown. Okay.
Well then I get Tucker Smallwood, and I get Manny Cotto, and I get Eric Pierpoint.
Okay. Well, I'm a little scared, but not so scared because I'm still hiding behind Phyllis on that. Okay. So, but yeah, she said that she was going to come back for Damage. So Warp 5 listeners, hang on, buckle up. Wow. We're going to see if we can pull that. We'll see if we can have her back on to talk about Damage. That will be awesome during the season 3 retrospective.
I'm looking forward to that.
So Enterprise show writers is not the only people we've been talking to on Trek FM this week. So here's what else you may have missed elsewhere on the network.
Previously on Trek.fm, Standard Orbit.
I open up the garment bag and I see this like red tunic, like this top. I'm like, wait, this looks really familiar. So I try it all on. I try on all the wardrobe. Everything fits great. And I look at myself in the mirror. I'm like, holy bleep. And I turned to the wardrobe supervisor. I said, is this Star Trek that I'm working on?
To the journey!
Leola root is a substitute for any ingredient he doesn't have.
No sugar, Leola root.
Yeah. No bananas, Leola root.
No coffee,
Leola root.
Saturday Morning Trek.
Roddenberry was very involved with the first episode. And for that episode, we needed to come up with the derelict spaceship. And as a result, as the brand new guy on the crew who had spaceships and stuff in his portfolio, I got the job of coming up with that ship.
Stage 9, a podcast about the people who make Star Trek.
I mean, obviously, you have Nicholas Meyer writing for your Star Trek show. Is there any way that they're not going to be like, hey, Nick, you want to direct an episode? Because, I mean, like, would they... I mean, I cannot see any scenario in which they'd be like, I don't know, man. I don't know if he's right for this gig.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out these shows and find out what we're talking about in your favorite core of the Star Trek universe. You can find us on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, or you can go to the website and grab the MP3 file or the RSS link. If you're an Apple user, please hit the subscribe button. That makes it easier for listeners to find us. And while you're there, you can leave us a review and a star rating, and that helps increase our visibility to other listeners and really helps us grow the show. And also, just another recap, we had our Blu-ray Warp 5 review contest over the past year, and we announced the new winner. The winner is Stronger Than Zetan. So Stronger Than Zetan, contact me, leave a message in one of the show posts on Facebook. I have a whole set, seasons 1, 2, 3, and 4 Blu-rays that I want to send your way. Thank you so much for your reviews, and thank everyone for leaving reviews for us, and thank you for listening to Warp 5. Another way you can help us is keep all of our shows coming to you each week is to become a patron of the network on Patreon. If you visit patreon.com/trekfm, that's patreon.com/trekfm, you can see all of our goals and milestones. And for just as little as $1 a month, you can help out our network tremendously. If all of our listeners just gave $1 to keep Trek FM coming to you, that would help us out so much. And if you increase it to $5 a month, you get access to the Patron Zone. And Brandon is the Patron Zone manager. So Brandon, tell us what's going on in the Patron Zone.
Oh, we've got lots of early access episodes for you guys to listen to, so you get them a couple of days early, and we have some really cool exclusive content, some commentaries, and some little deleted scenes from episodes, and little short clips of small episodes that people have created for you guys, the patrons.
And if you want to step up to $15 a month, you actually get access to the Patrons Roundtable. And that's actually where I got my start. And Brandon, that's where you got your start, right? Also, right?
You bet. Yeah, absolutely.
And almost a lot of our current hosts right now in Trek FM actually started by contributing to the network on patreon.com and participating in the Patrons Roundtable. It can be a lot of fun. For just $15 a month, you get to actually sit and talk to other Trek FM fans and Trek FM hosts. So if you want to see what it's like to be a podcaster, you can sample it right there with the Patrons Roundtable. And of course, if you go to $25 a month, we can get you a associate producer credit on your favorite show. So, and speaking of associate producers, I'd like to thank our Warp 5 associate producers, Mike Morrison and Tim Cooper. Thank you so much for supporting Warp 5 and Trek FM. Also like to thank Tony Robinson for creating the very cool show art for our Warp 5 episodes. And Brandon Shea, you've got the engineering all handled with the editing and publishing of Warp 5. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
If you'd like to get in touch with us here at Trek FM, you can always find us at trek.fm/contact. Look in the sidebar on the show page or go to speakpipe.com/trekfm and leave us a voicemail. You can also contact us through Twitter at Trek FM, Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM, and as we've mentioned several times in this episode, the Babel Conference. Type the Babel Conference, BABEL, into the search field on Facebook, or go to our website at Trek.fm and click discussion on the menu bar. So, wow, Brandon, this is awesome. This was great to get to talk to the person that actually wrote our favorite episodes. That was pretty. That's a highlight right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and you ask her about the guy in the pod, and she didn't really have something for us, which actually that just opens up a whole new Warp 5 episode for us, right?
That means I have to write the prequel story for the dead guy on that. I'm okay with that.
Or what we can do is, like we said, we can bring Phyllis back and do the writer's room, and we'll get that story written down. Yeah, there you go. I mean, you're already practicing your writing skills over there in the corner, earlier, so we can just continue right on. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. So Brandon, when you're not just slaving over a typewriter trying to impress Phyllis Strong with your show writing ability, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon Matella, and every once in a while I poke my head up in the Babel Conference. Where can people find you, Floyd, when you're not sitting around a campfire?
You can find me in the Babel Conference, also Trek FM's listeners page on Facebook. So Boomers, thank you for listening, and join us again next time for another episode of Warp 5.